Okay, so I've been talking to a lot of new folks, folks new to clicker training, about clicker training recently, and they're like, okay, great, that's wonderful, but like the next question is, how do I start? Where do I start? What do I teach first? And how do I do this in a way that is not setting my horse up to be like a treat monster? Because that's one of the biggest fears, biggest concerns that I hear from folks when I am introducing the concept of using food rewards to create behaviors. Is either they've heard someone tell them, never give your horse treats by hand, never hand feed, it's so dangerous, or they have a horse who's muggy and has learned to kind of mug pockets or be pushy around food, and they're concerned that that means that now clicker training won't work, right? Because I have a cookie monster, this isn't going to work. So I'll show you guys in this video exactly how I would start with a horse who's never done clicker training before, and we can talk a little bit about like maybe how we'd adjust things if the horse already has some bad manners around food, right? Because a lot of times that's something that we've created accidentally, and it is a real concern because they can absolutely become cookie monsters. It can be dangerous. It is something that we need to introduce in a thoughtful way so we avoid those issues. And if you have a cookie monster, I'm going to show you with my cookie monster in the video today, you can absolutely teach them to have appropriate manners around food, and it will fix a lot of those problems that you're having. So Forrest, who I'll use in my example, he was one, if I had cookies in my pockets, like he would not rest. And he was boop, 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 pushy, 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 so aggravating. And, you know, he wasn't dangerous necessarily because it's just not in his nature, but a different horse with the same thought process around food being in people's pockets could absolutely become dangerous, right? So we want to make sure that we're not inviting that and that we're fixing it if it's in there already. Because even if you're not going to clicker train, you don't need a horse who's aggressive and inappropriate around food, because if you're feeding them a meal or whatever. I'm rambling. Let's talk about how we'd start. So in order to get started, you just need a couple of things. My first behavior is going to be keep your head in your own personal space bubble. Forrest just not in my tripod. So the first behavior is going to be keep your head in your own personal space, okay? So what that requires is a clicker and some kind of food. I use hay pellets. This is alfalfa Timothy mix. You can use whatever you want, but I use hay pellets like most of the time, and especially in the beginning, okay? So if you're new to it, a clicker, even if you're not new to it, a clicker is a really great tool. It's gonna make a really sharp, crisp sound. And a lot of people are tempted to just say a word or make a noise with their mouth. They don't want to deal with the clicker. This is crisp. It sounds the same every time. It's very clear to a horse who is new to the training. And your timing can be real precise. If you're relying on a or a yes, you gotta be, Forrest heard that, you gotta be mindful that it's the same every time, that it's not a word you're using in casual conversation that can be confusing, that your tone of voice is the same, especially in the beginning when the horse doesn't really know the deal. So this cuts down on a lot of that accidental errors that you might be making without even noticing that it's confusing to your horse. So I do recommend a clicker. First behavior, keep your head in your own personal space. This is it. We're then going to do targeting. So I'll go ahead and show you guys a target. This one's dirty. This is just a buoy glued to the end of a wooden dowel. Like, it can be anything. It's super simple. The one I use most often is like on a little extendable thing from Shauna Karish, but you don't have to buy something. You can make something. Like, I've seen people tape a water bottle to the end of a stick, or a pool noodle, or like there's all kind of stuff you could do. So you can be creative. You don't have to go buy stuff if you're not 100% sure, especially. So Forrest is like playing with my tripod, he's ready to go. So let's show what this looks like. Okay, behavior 1, stand next to me in your own personal space. Don't mug my pockets. So let me bring him so he's in frame. He's targeting my target on the ground. Come here, buddy. This way. Get in the frame. Whoop. Spin this way. This way. Yes. Okay. So, in the beginning, your horse is not going to know what the clicker means. They don't know that this sound means anything. So we're pairing it. But we want to pair it while the horse is doing a thing that we like. Because we don't want to accidentally train something that we didn't mean to train. So, notice as I'm feeding him, I'm going to feed him out of my bubble. I'm feeding him over here. I'm not clicking yet, because I'm just letting him know that I have food. Okay. When he's in his bubble, I'm going to click and feed. When he's in his bubble, click and feed. That can be head neutral, that can be head slightly away. In the beginning, I just don't want him in my bubble, right? So you can decide what you want your criteria to be for that default behavior. Some people want head away, some people prefer it neutral. In the beginning, head out of my space, and then you can shape it to what you really want. So Forrest knows this. He's not offering any mugging. I'm gonna just stop and kind of see if I can create a situation where he decides to mug me. So I can show you how I deal with it. He's like, what do you want? If he does mug me, I'm gonna make it inviting. If he mugs me, he's like, I'd rather go try something else than mug him. He's so good. Yes, good man, come here. So we'll just talk about it. I don't want to get him too frustrated. If he does mug me and I feel safe just blocking my pouch, I'm just going to mostly ignore it, right? I'm going to let him think about it. There we go. So if he's coming from my pouch, I'm gonna let him think about it, but I am absolutely not gonna let him get access to the food. And then when he looks away or gets in his own space, then I will click. Of course, we've worked on this a lot, so he's really not thinking about mugging me even when I try to make it happen, which is exactly the point, right? So if they do mug and you feel safe, just block access, wait them out, let them sniff it, but absolutely do not let them get food. And then when they go back into their space, click and feed. And feed over here in their zone, right? Not right here in yours. If you don't feel safe, because there are going to be cases where the horse is maybe getting a little too aggressive and it's not a safe thing. If that's the case, I'm going to give Forrest something to do. If that's the case, then I'm going to suggest you go in what we call protected contact. So you can put yourself on one side of a fence and your horse on the other, a gate or something. I try not to do somewhere where maybe there's like electric fence running, because they're going to not want to get close to the fence. But you're going to separate yourself from your horse with a physical barrier. And that just eliminates the possibility of the horse like really climbing on top of you. Gives you both a sense of security, and it's a great tool to use. So if you're gonna do it that way, the rules are the same, right? You're gonna wait for the horse to put his head away from you and in a place that feels like where you want it, what feels safe to you, whatever criteria that means for you. You're gonna click and you're gonna feed. So your hand's gonna go across the fence and feed the horse on their side of the fence, not across the fence on your side of the fence, because the whole point of this is you stay in your personal space, I stay in mine, and where is that bubble? So as the trainer, you get to decide how big your bubble is, because some people are really nervous when a horse gets close to them at liberty like this, and they want a big bubble. Some people like don't mind their horse climbing all over them. You don't want them climbing all over you, but your bubble might be here and someone else's is over here. You guys get to decide where your bubble is. That's the beauty of the shaping, right? You can determine head away, head neutral, where you want it. Personally, I like head neutral, and I like my horse probably like a medium amount away from me. But I absolutely have worked with folks who are real nervous when the horse is right here, like as close as Forrest was to me. So they could train their horse to stand a little further away. Not a big deal. And again, if they're making you nervous, go in protected contact, get it nice and like so the horse really understanding it across the fence line, and then bring it back to where you guys are together and try again. And that really works well. It really does. So, okay, let's go on to the next. The next behavior we're going to teach is touching a target stick. Again, we talked about this. It can be anything. This is what I use a lot of times because it sits outside in the weather and I don't have to worry about it getting messed up. Touching this is going to be a really useful skill, first of all, for continuing to build the understanding of what the clicker means, and because this is going to be helpful in creating other behaviors as we go. So I'm going to move Forrest so that we're in the frame a little bit better, and we'll talk through it as if he had never done this before, although you guys know he knows this. Okay. So what I do with a horse who's never seen it before is I'm just going to present it in a close location to their nose. Again, feeding him in his personal space, and I'm not going to present the target until his head is in his own personal space. So if he's mugging me, the target doesn't come up. I wait till he's here, and then I'm going to offer it. So Forrest knows this, but most horses that I introduce this to, they want to check it out. Horses like to explore stuff with their noses and their mouths. Pretty natural thing for them to just check it out. If you have a horse who's nervous, or maybe they've got some kind of traumatic history, or they're just real skeptical of new stuff, because that absolutely will happen. Let me give him something to munch on and we'll talk. If your horse is more fearful, you might start by clicking them for I present the target and you look at it, or I present the target and you flick your ears towards it. Or you might go back to protected contact, not because you're uncomfortable with your horse mugging you, but because your horse is afraid of the target. So if they're not going straight for it, we need to kind of figure out how can we make this less intimidating. And some horses are just gonna need a little bit more hand-holding through that process than others. Confident guy like Forrest is like, oh, what's that? And it's easy to capture it, but it doesn't always work that way. So protected contact is a great way to offer it. And again, starting with shaping that criteria, make it a little bit easier. Can you look at it? Can you put your ears towards it? Can you think about touching it? And work up to actually touching it. Because I know touch it with your nose seems like a simple task, but if your horse is having trouble with it, how can you break that down into smaller pieces and ultimately get them to touch it? Once they're touching it right in front of their face, you can progress to, like, can you reach over here and touch it? Let's see. I'm gonna feed him in the middle. Oh, good mechanics. Can you reach over here? So you can vary the location of the target. And my criteria, if my feet are still, I usually want the horse to touch it with their nose. So once they have the idea, I want him to actually touch the target with his nose if my feet are still. That's my rule. Again, I'll teach you my rules and then you guys do what you want. But I'll explain better why I have this distinction when we go on to behavior 3. And we can kind of get fancy with it and bring it over his back, and that kind of stuff starts to translate to riding, to other stuff, knowing that it might come from above. So I like to play around with that too. There's all kinds of stuff. Okay. Gotta keep it concise today. Behavior 3 is gonna be follow the target at a walk. So I mentioned in the first targeting video, touch it. My feet are still, I want you to touch it. When my feet are moving and we're walking, I just want them oriented towards it. I don't want them to touch it because the reason for this is some horses, when you make them touch it in motion, they start to feel like they have to chase it. And it gets a little frustrating and they're like, how do I get it? And then they're like biting or they're rushing, and it's not as relaxed as we'd like it to be, because I want this to be calm, easy, relaxed. It's going to turn into leading. It's going to turn into a lot of stuff. So I don't want that like anxious chasing energy attached to it. So I want to click while they're oriented towards the target. They're looking at it, but not touching it. And so I'm going to click when he's leading in a place that I want, close, like where I'm kind of at his shoulder. That's kind of where I want to be. And where he's looking at the target, that's what I'm going to click and mark. So we'll show you guys that too. So if they get a little lost like that, just hold a beat and see if you can get them reoriented back and click. So that's the thing that's going to happen. So in the beginning, they've never done this before. You're going to be asking for like 1 or 2 steps towards the target, click, treat, couple steps, click, treat. Over time, you start to build that up from 1 step to 2 steps to 5 steps to 10 steps to all the around, and however long you want. But depending on your horse will depend how slowly or quickly you increase that duration, how quickly you progress. Now it'll depend on their understanding, and they'll let you know when they're ready. So that's 1, 2, 3. Stand with your head in your own space. Touch the target standing still. Follow the target at a walk. Those 3 things set up a those 3 things set up a really nice understanding generally for the horse. He's messing with my tripod. The perils of filming with a horse in the space with you. Those 3 behaviors really set you up to be able to then go do anything else. That gives the horse a really solid opportunity to understand what this clicker means, to make that association between this bridge signal and the fact that food is coming, right? So you heard me. So those 3 are simple, and I think they do a really good job. And then you can take this to a million other places, right? But if you've got these 3 things down, then I think that sets your horse up to be able to then go on and do the next stuff. So that's why I teach them first. It also keeps the horse out of your personal space. They're learning how to operate with food without climbing all over you and getting in your business and being super annoying. Horse is like, please pay attention. I would like to do more. Okay, so that's that. That's your starting point. I hope that's helpful for you guys. Thanks for tuning in.